Gear acquisition syndrome, a seemingly uncontrollable urge or desire to buy more and more camera equipment as a means to fulfill one's needs, which leads to spending money on things we never use, stressing out over the best equipment, and less actual photography overall. Photographers left and right struggle with gas. A shiny new camera comes out over here. An older, quirky, vintage camera shows up over here. And we need it, because getting that camera or lens is what's going to get us the photos we want, give us the photography experience we want, and allow us to become the photographer we want. BS. There's nothing that new camera will allow you to do that you can't already do with what you have. There's no new camera gear that will make you a better photographer. And there's no more photography experience you'll get from a camera than actually going outside and taking more photos. And of course, one can argue that the right gear makes for a better experience and better photos. And certain tech advances can definitely make your life easier if you're a vlogger or something. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about photography specifically. And I'm talking about the emotional, psychological component of always seeming to want what you don't have. That's what we're going to break down today. Gear acquisition syndrome and how to stop it. Step 1. Learn the hard way. In the past, I used to have many of my own problems with gear acquisition syndrome. Maybe not to the extent of some people because I tend to be very frugal, but I'd always have a reason to want something. Even though I had cameras like the X100V, which I considered the perfect camera for me, and never technically needed anything else, I kept thinking to myself, I wonder what my photos would look like if I had this lens. Or maybe, how would things change if I shot with this focal length or body? And I'm not gonna lie, I still have those thoughts every now and then. But they're not to the extent that they bothered me so much anymore. So how did I get over this? The first step was, unfortunately, to learn the hard way. I was lucky enough to find that camera early on in my journey, but not smart enough to stop there. I ran through and bought many different lenses and bodies, sold and resold gear, until I eventually built the kit I have now. And that was a long process in itself. One that I eventually got tired of. It was a waste of time, energy, and money going back and forth trying to find the perfect fit. And eventually I soon realized that I didn't need anything else. I already had the tools I needed and I just had to focus on photography. So a practical first step you can do is look, grab, and hold each piece of camera gear you currently have. Wipe off some of the dust that's been sitting on each of your lenses and ask yourself, do I really even need this? Do I actually even use this? And you don't have to be overly sentimental about it, this is just an exercise. Go through each of your gear and really question the purpose and use of each piece of equipment. And then reflect on the gear you're thinking about buying and then ask yourself the same questions. Do I really need this? What am I going to use this for? What can I actually do with this that I can't already do now? And is it really worth that whole expense in not only the money terms, but also the headache that you're giving yourself trying to find and get this new gear? One by one, you'll have your answer. Step 2. Let go of dust collectors. As you accumulate gear, certain pieces of equipment that you don't use will start accumulating dust. I'll be honest with you guys, the Fujifilm X Pro 1 is one of those cameras for me. I do like and enjoy, but I always seem to find myself grabbing the X100VI or the X Pro 3 over this, which kind of makes sense. And so what I really should do is let that camera go because I don't really use it as much as I should be. And in theory, it's better off in someone else's hands who will make more use of it. But it's hard because I always find myself or give myself some reason or justification for keeping it. Like, oh, maybe I need to mix it up sometimes and practice with a different body. Or maybe I can do an updated review of this camera later and compare it with all these newer bodies. So I totally get it. You probably also have some gear that you don't use or need and you know it, but can't let go of it. And I think for certain special cameras, that's okay. Ones that hold deep sentimental value that you probably can't sell for much anyways, those are okay to keep. But that doesn't apply for everything, and some stuff we just need to let go. So if we want to actually get over our gear acquisition syndrome, we need to start by letting go. I would begin with the gear that you actually don't use and don't care about. Those ones are much easier to let go of. For example, in the past year, I've sold many pieces of equipment that I knew I didn't need. Lenses like the TT Artisan 27mm or the XF 16-55. I had other lenses that basically did the same things and I didn't find myself missing them. So start with the easy ones and then slowly progress into the bigger ones. And the good news here is that letting go of camera gear actually creates more breathing room and a clear space for knowing what you actually need and use. You sell the first one, and then the second one becomes easier to let go of. And if you're having trouble with a particular piece of equipment, ask yourself, how much have I actually used this in the past month? If the answer is none, you probably don't need it. Step 3. One in, one out. When you begin clearing your inventory, you actually make room for new gear. Because here's the thing, beating gear acquisition syndrome doesn't mean stopping buying gear entirely. Because let's admit, we like camera gear, and I'm not telling you to stop liking what you like. Rather, it's about moderation, keeping our wants under control and not spending excessively on stuff we don't need or use. And to keep our focus on photography, not gear, because that's why we bought this gear in the first place, right? Which means buying and keeping only the stuff we need and use. So this whole process is just for us to filter in and filter out the gear we use and don't use. And the end goal is to build our own small ideal kit of gear we do use every day that covers all our needs. If you're having trouble understanding how much you need, try keeping this in mind. For most photographers, all we really need is one body, one prime, and one zoom. That's it. Unless you're an active professional photographer who takes photos for work, this will cover most of our bases. And chances are, most working photographers actually know what gear they use and don't use and is worth them keeping. And there's probably a combo of body and lens that covers about 80% of their work. The other 20% is just occasional use stuff. So if you're having trouble eliminating options, keep telling yourself, less is more. It's a tough psychological barrier because we as humans are natural worriers. We'll wonder things like, oh, but what if I need this focal length for this? Or maybe, oh, what about this one? Maybe I'll use this one later. But if you actually think about it, when's the last trip you took that you actually made use of all your camera gear? When you went on vacation, brought 5 lenses and 2 bodies, and then really only used one body and lens for the entire trip. This happens all the time. We think we need all this gear to cover all our bases, and then quickly realize it's just more functionally better to have a simple, minimal setup. So get rid of stuff because you don't need it. Here's a useful framework that helps me keep my kit small and minimal. One in, one out. Meaning if there's any new piece of equipment I want, it comes at the expense of another lens or camera body in my current kit. So if I want something new, I have to let something go. And this forces me to think even harder before buying a new piece of gear. Yes, this lens is good, but is it better than what I already have? Probably not by that much. It's like having limited inventory slots. You've only got so much space in your house, camera bag, and mental photographer inventory, so you can't have everything. And reminding yourself one in, one out can help you make your decision-making process much more refined. It'll also make sure you don't overstock and start accumulating all these lenses and bodies that you don't need and don't use. Personally, I found this to be the most practical way to keep my gas under control, because the price of this new gear isn't just the cost in dollars, it's also this other lens that I like. So let's sum this up real quick. Gear acquisition syndrome sucks because it makes us less appreciative of what we have and makes us overspend on things we don't need. Plus, it makes us focus less on photography and more on gear. So how do we overcome it? Step 1 is to learn the hard way. Buy and sell a bunch of gear and slowly realize by experience that the cycle never ends. Even when you buy all the new gear, you'll always seem to want something new, and you'll start to accumulate these dust collectors that you never use. Then, I'd encourage you to go around and take a close look at every piece of gear you currently have. Treat it as an exercise and try to internalize your thoughts about this gear. Think about how it felt when you first wanted that lens, what went through your mind as you got it, and how little you use it now. Step 2 is to start by letting go of things you don't need. Start with the smaller, cheaper, third-party lenses and then move on to the bigger ones. Once you get one out of the way, the others will come more easily. And then you'll be able to think more clearly about what you need and what you don't need. Step 3 is to live by the phrase, one in, one out. Meaning, if you're gonna buy something new, you gotta let something go. Otherwise, you're just accumulating more and more dust collectors. And also remember, less is more. A minimal kit is more simple, easier to bring around, and less taxing on our creative brain. Because instead of worrying about what gear we're gonna use, we're more focused on the photos we're gonna take. Now, it's not gonna be easy. But if you can follow this, you can get your gear acquisition syndrome under control, and then you can focus more on photography. That's the hypothesis anyways. Try it out, it's what worked for me, hopefully it'll work for you. So if this helped, please do send this to another friend who you also think it might help. You can also learn more in the newsletter down below. Also, if you like photo books, you can check out my latest photography zine, The Sinking Sun, and you can get a free 4x6 print down in the link down below if you haven't yet. Thanks for watching as always, good luck, have a great day, peace.